All right, what's going on, everybody? I believe we are live on YouTube and Facebook. We've got a great show for you today. So do me a favor, as you are jumping in, give us a shout out and let us know where you're tuning in from. One of the things that we like to do every single time we go live is try to connect people with people. So a lot of times, I mean, we did it earlier today. A lot of times people jump in and, they have a deal, that you have a buyer, etc. So let us know where you're tuning in from. And we're going to kick this thing off here in just a minute. Looks like we got Fred in the chat, and Anthony, and Christina, and Josh, and Nancy. What's going on, guys? We got Casa Grande, Arizona. I love it. I love it. All sorts of near Charlotte, North Carolina. Love it. Cool. So guys, let's do this. We're gonna kick it off. Today we've got a really special show, and it's special because of the people on it, and I am referring to Rick and Will. So I've known these guys for a long time. They've both been in the KNGDM Center for years. Both of them are great guys, great real estate investors, great friends. So I'm really excited to have them on there. Rick, Will, how are you guys?
Doing phenomenal today, brother. Absolutely phenomenal.
Great.
I just had
Thanks
an
for having us
amazing
here.
jerk chicken lunch, and I'm happy about it.
There we go. Yeah, you got more of a lunch than I did, man. I'm jealous.
Well,
Rick,
I usually skip lunch, so I'm glad that I had some today.
Absolutely. Rick, how about you, man? How we doing today?
Hey, it's a good day. Always a good day.
Beautiful. So guys, our topic today is how to become recession proof. So a lot of people, I would consider them somewhat uneducated. They look at markets like, the 2007, 2008 thing, and they say real estate's a bad option because there's a lot of risk associated with it. But your guys' spin and your guys' approach has been pretty different. It's been pretty unique. Basically, hey, look, we can become recession proof through different strategy and through different tactic. So I want to spend some time talking about that. And I guess let's kick it off with, like, what do you guys actually mean when you say recession proof? Like, what is your definition of being recession proof?
Well, so
either of you.
One thing that clearly defines that for me personally is that essentially we're going after problems that are ever present, right? We are going after people who have specific issues, financial distress, which happens typically as a result of death, divorce, illness, all kinds of things that happen to all kinds of people all the time, right? These are not things that, like, you got to be a lazy bum to suddenly develop heart disease or something like that. It doesn't work that way. But these problems always exist, no matter what. Even in the most mellow and stable of real estate markets, we still have roughly 1 million Americans every single year that go into a state of free foreclosure. Okay. Another thing that's very important to understand, and this is part of why we've embraced this rather contrarian approach to real estate investing, is on average, nationwide, the foreclosure process from start to finish takes about 18 months. This makes it a very unique niche because we have, with the same homeowner who has the same problem that we're trying to solve, we oftentimes have between a year and a year and a half to come up with an actual solution before we run out of time. Does that make sense? So a huge portion of what we're doing is actually built around the concepts that are conveyed in the book, The Obstacle is the Way. Basically, we are running toward the gunfire because that's where the opportunities are. Does that make sense?
It does, but I think for a lot of people, they're like, well, isn't pre-foreclosure or foreclosure bad? Well, yes, but there's also
it's horrible.
It produces opportunity. So what I love about Rick and Will and a lot of these other guys is, like, we literally just solve problems, and if we solve problems, we get paid. Plain and simple. So is foreclosure bad? Yes, it's a bad problem that we have a solution for. You guys agree with that?
Correct.
Yeah,
that is correct.
Yeah, that's really the whole premise, right, of what we do on a day-to-day basis. Be able to provide solutions, true solutions, right, and options for the borrower that make us unique, right? You know, if somebody comes in and kind of sees you as a we buy ugly houses cash buyer, right? And you're not empathetic and sympathetic and truly know what you're talking about and being able to provide solutions, then they're less likely to work with you. So being able to provide pre-foreclosure or forced sales solutions are key to working in this niche.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what, I mean, I'm asking questions as if I've never heard of any of this. Obviously I'm familiar with what you guys are talking about, but not everybody is. So outside of them, you know, so they're in, you guys are primarily pre-foreclosure or foreclosure? Pre, right?
Pre-foreclosure.
Primarily
Yeah.
pre-foreclosure.
And really, if you take that a step further, right? I mean, there's a whole gamut of pre-foreclosure. We prefer to be on that very, very front end, the notice of default or notice of list pendants, that first legal action, because that provides you time to market to somebody, get a hold of somebody, and be able to provide them all of their options. A lot of times we see investors actually focusing on the trustee sale or the the sale date or the auction date, and that becomes problematic, because if you're trying to build that life by design and you're constantly finally being contacted by a borrower who has buried their head in the sand for the last 6, 8, 10, 12 months, maybe even several years, now it becomes a thing when you're sitting at dinner with your family and they say jump and you say how high, right? If you get it up early enough in the process and you get third party authorization, right, the ability to speak with the bank or the servicer on behalf of the borrower themselves, now you're in control of that situation. And a lot of times banks and institutions communicate in 7 to 10 day cycles. So you take care of something, and if you don't want to take care of something today, you always have tomorrow as well, right? It's not one of these, hey, I'm just one of 5 people making an offer to this seller. I am now a solution provider. The seller loves me because I'm helping them at their a really deep time of financial distress. The banks and institutions love me because they consider me part of their loss mitigation team. They do not want to take the property back. They do not want to foreclose on that property, right? They want to come up with a pre-foreclosure solution so that they can then move on, right? Meet their KPIs that they have.
Yeah. Will, anything to add to that?
Yeah, man. I mean, this is the best way that I've always explained it since I first started doing this in March of 2000 is working in forced sales is essentially the equivalent of, rather than going into, from perhaps a medical metaphor, rather than going into being a primary care physician, you're going into the emergency room, because there's always going to be emergencies, right? Even during the best of times, there's always going to be people who lose their spouse tragically, people who lose their job, people who, and God knows what else happens. All kinds of different things happen, addictions, affairs, all kinds of things happen. It's just part of human existence. And when these things happen, they tend to trigger a financial consequence in most cases. We're there to help these people. These are people who are going through probably the worst time of their life in most cases. And we're actually there as basically a lighthouse for them during that time, and we guide them to safe passage. So that's essentially the role we're aiming to play.
Yeah, I mean, that's huge. And with that, going through the most difficult time of your life, which is, by the way, which is why I don't do pre-foreclosure. It's like you guys have way more patience than I do. Like I just want to slap people upside the head and say, "Hey, man, get over it. Like let's go." So kudos to you guys. But these people that are
It's an
going through the most,
empathy-heavy niche, man. Very empathy-heavy.
this is where like know thyself comes into play. It is not my niche for sure. But guys, with that comes a lot of bad information. These guys are talking to their cousin Jimmy, who may or may not be a real estate agent. They think that whatever the bank sent them is final. They think that the only option that they have is blank. So there's a lot of bad information and a lot of bad emotion. So when you guys come and approach this through like a solution-based approach, like what does that normally look like? Do you guys typically give multiple solutions at once? Do you start with the one that's best for them? Like what does that process look like?
Yeah. I mean, it really is.
Start with diagnosis first.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah,
always
go
going to
ahead. Go
start with a
ahead.
diagnosis first. It's essentially the equivalent of x-rays and blood work. So initially what we're doing is we're reaching out to the financial institution that they're having a hard time with, whether that's a bank, a servicer, the IRS, whoever it is. And we're gathering information as to exactly how bad their problem is and how much time they have left before we start proposing solutions.
And I really
Yeah.
think, we all know in what we do, there is the want and there is the need. And those two don't often match. It doesn't matter what niche you're in, there's always a want and a need. And you sometimes have to provide multiple options and then also really get to know and understand somebody to guide them to what they truly need. Right? You can work through all those different options, but right, it is part of our job to really help them understand where they're at. And sometimes that can take months, or sometimes that can actually take years to accomplish. So understanding the options and the want versus the actual need and getting them to the right solution.
So, I mean, so guys, why do it? If it's going to take that long, you said months,
Absolutely.
sometimes even years, like why not just do a normal deal?
Yeah. Tons of power, right? And being able to be that solution provider, right? When somebody is in pre-foreclosure, it doesn't necessarily mean a short sale, right? It doesn't necessarily mean a lease option, or it doesn't necessarily mean a subject to. What we do on a day-to-day basis is focus on those three acquisition techniques. There are other options like loan modifications, forbearance, partial claims, other ways for the borrower to actually take care of their problem. We simply put them down the right path. And if it happens to be one that we specialize in or one that we want, right, we teach this from the investor standpoint. How do I acquire the properties for myself? I think that is key. And it doesn't always take years or months. When we're talking years or months, a lot of times that has to do with somebody who has upside down equity, right? This is where we're talking about low to no equity with a lot of work and a potential short sale. But you can do a subject to, or you can do a lease option acquisition to cure their problem. And you can do that in a matter of, days or even weeks, right? So there's the ups and the downs and the different acquisition techniques that we talk about.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. So, guys, if you have questions, for those of you guys that are watching and tuning in live, appreciate you guys. But if you guys have questions, make sure you guys post them. So, I mean, you guys have a lot of leverage, and you have a lot of different options for people, providing them the best and the most accurate information for where they're at based on the diagnosis. Why does it take so long, and how difficult? I'm kind of grilling you guys with questions. Boom, 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 boom. Why does it take so long? And I'm just trying to think of like what bad information would people watching this have, or like what questions do I think that they would ask? People are being shy. But why does it take so long? And how difficult is it to work with like the banks and some of the other institutions that are involved?
The reason for the delays, generally speaking, is the institutions themselves. Rather than dealing with an individual human being, you're dealing with an institution that is made up of a whole bunch of human beings, dozens, possibly hundreds, or even thousands. And many of them have their own ability or option of making decisions, right? So there are a whole bunch of people that somehow, some way have some level of input into the situation. And as a result of that, I mean, we're communicating typically in 7 to 10 day intervals. So if I speak to Wells Fargo today, Tuesday, what is this, October 2nd or 3rd or whatever the hell it is. If I speak to them today, Tuesday, October 3rd, I'm checking back in again around the 13th, 14th, 15th of October, typically. That's rather than an individual person where I might talk to them today and set an expectation that we'll talk again tomorrow. Because of how bureaucratic these institutions are and slow moving and slow to react, it moves at a different pace. You know what I mean? Moves at a different pace. There's a lot more legality involved. There's a lot more red tape involved. But the very same rule book that makes it a pain in the ass also provides us with amazing opportunities that don't exist elsewhere in real estate. For example, Rick just recently closed a deal, very, very recently, about 10 days ago. He closed a deal where utilizing one of the techniques that we teach, he was able to actually adjust the purchase price by $128,000 in one
Wow.
conversation.
That is insane. It's truly,
So that took a deal that was upside down and turned it into, what was it, $30,000 profit, something along those lines. With the deal that for most real estate investors that came along, that was going to be a nothing profit. It was an upside down deal. There was no juice in that orange. Utilizing one simple, quick technique, he was able to actually create a massive amount of juice in that orange. And above and beyond that, he was able to sell that to a specific, essentially partner. You know, this is one buyer that is going to be buying dozens of deals a year from his company. So,
yeah, I mean that. It's like I was thinking earlier, like why the hell would you do this? Like, you know, it takes longer. There's more headache. You're dealing with emotional people. You're dealing with institutions. But I mean that's a great example. Like, dude, not only can you create more profit, but you can actually source deals that almost every other agent and or investor has already said no to. You know, I mean,
exactly.
dude, it was like $130,000 swing. Like that's make and break for 90% of deals. I mean, that's
Yes.
pretty epic. We've got a couple questions that I think are probably relevant at the moment. So these types of, throw it up here on the screen from Fred. Can these be assignable or must be double closing?
I love this one because this was also one that I just did within the last couple of weeks. Was bad information, right? This comes from the 2008 era. You know, you can't assign a short sale. You can't assign a short sale. Well, you're right. You can't assign a short sale. Banks will not allow an assignment of contract on a short sale. When they go through the process of underwriting, part of it is to underwrite the buyer on it, right? The actual offer that we have. So that's who they're expecting to actually close on the deal. 2008, people talked about, well, putting it into an entity and just selling the entity, all kinds of different tricks. Now, the cleanest and easiest way to do it is to do a double close, right? And that is your entity is going to close on it. 30 minutes later, the buying entity is going to come in and close behind you. That's the simplest and easiest way to do it. But I actually went through the process to where my entity was actually fully approved as the buyer. Approval to participate is what they call it. And then I did what's known as a rescission of contract. So we sent the bank, you know, the institution, we sent them an email and said, we've got good news, bad news. Bad news is the current approved buyer is backing out. The good news is we've got a buyer stepping in at the same exact terms. And what you have to understand about these opportunities, it's almost like a video game where you get to a certain point in the video game. If you die, you only go back to this level. You don't go all the way back to the beginning. So all we needed to do at that point was get the end buyer qualified or approval to participate. And then what I did was actually sent my mutual release of contract to the title company and said, I am rescinding my contract and I need a rescission fee or a consultation fee of $10,000. And they just put that on the buyer's side of the HUD. That gets sent to get approved by the bank or the institution, and they don't care because their side of the transaction didn't change. It was the same exact numbers that they bought. They approved the buyer. They could care less what the end buyer actually pays on the other side. Just do not put assignment of contract. But a consultation fee is okay, and that's a technique and a way to actually do that, Fred.
That's
Absolutely.
that's
I love that video game reference, by the way. That was a very good way of explaining that.
Yeah.
You get to a certain checkpoint, you don't have to go back and redo that which came before that checkpoint. So it's very much like just, you know, like in a video game, exactly like that. In a video game, you end up dying at a certain point in the game. You fall off the bridge or whatever, but you get to restart from a certain point that is not the initial beginning point of the game. And that's magical. I mean, that's been able to save or create profits out of literally hundreds of opportunities that in other types of transactions, because you're dealing with an individual or a family, and there's no institution there, there's no infrastructure there. See, these institutions, whether it's the IRS, any given servicer or bank, they have rules. And to the very same extent that those rules can serve them, and the structure that they've created for processing any given piece of business can serve them, it can also be used against them like a double-edged sword. And that's what I do for a living all day, every day.
William, you'd be a good answer to this one, but Jennifer's asking about some different empathy tactics that you use to get homeowners to be open towards you in your marketing. You want to tackle that one, or you want Rick to do it?
I'm very comfortable with that. That's one that, you know, more so than anything else, I try to not be a fucking millennial. I try to not be Gen Z in that regard. What I mean by that, we don't communicate with shorthand texts and stuff like that. We do a lot more of like, try to emulate what your grandparents did and actually have some social skills and be able to deal with human beings. So for starters, we're not looking to do things necessarily in massive volume. We're never talking to somebody in such a way where it appears that we want to wrap that conversation up so we can move on to the next. You know, I don't want to be looking at my watch while I'm talking to somebody. You know what I mean? So we go out of our way to give them enough time that they're actually heard. The number one thing that I find is we are going to meet up with them in person. It's a process, not an event. With a lot of wholesale deals and other quick decision type deals, it's an event. It's not a process. You call up, you make an offer, the offer's accepted, you blast off a contract via email right then and there, they sign it, and you're moving forward toward closing. In this case, we're cultivating a relationship long-term with this party. We're often speaking to these people for months before it turns into a deal. However, very, very important to understand that in most cases, we're talking to dozens of them at the same time for months before they turn into deals. You know, so very commonly, I will take in a dozen opportunities in a week and start processing them all at the same time. Some of them we started talking to 6 months ago. Some of them we started talking to last weekend. Does that make sense? But I'm able to stack a shitload of them because of the fact that we're just going after this one specific niche. So specialization ends up resulting in a much easier business, in all honesty, because I'm typically vetted with the seller before they ever even meet me. Like most sellers, when they meet with me, it's because their attorney, who they trust and who they've been handing their hard-earned money to, told them that I'm the guy they need to talk to. That's exactly what we teach people to do, is to become that guy and to have your entire local market know that you are that guy. And when I say that guy, just for clarity here, because we're doing this on YouTube and socials and shit, that is not a sexist remark. That guy can be that guy or that gal, okay? It's entirely open. I just used one term, but it wasn't meant to convey gender.
I'm offended. I don't know about anybody else in the audience, but I am personally offended. But no, I mean, like to your point, man, like it goes back to, and this is something that I've taught for years. It's like avatar and copywriting. Like you're not going to talk to the pre-foreclosure person, guy or girl, the same that you would to a landlord. I mean, like completely different scenario versus somebody that does fix and flip or even inherited. So when you niche down like that, and when you're very specific about your languaging in your marketing, and then that languaging is consistent throughout the conversation, it really does go a long way. What I see people do is they try to send something generic to everybody, hoping to like, I'm just going to attract 2% here, 1% here, 0.5%, etc. But the language isn't consistent, and then when they get on the phone, they have no idea what to do, which sucks. So guys, don't do that. Like be specific about not only your avatar, which these guys have a very, very clear, you know, hey, this is pre-foreclosure, but the messaging that goes out, it truly is a game changer. Had a couple other questions in here, guys.
Sure.
Throw it up on the screen here. So Christina was asking, do you all use real estate agents who specialize in distressed properties, or do you use public records to locate the pre-foreclosure properties?
Both.
Yep. Big time.
We do both of those. Both of those are very heavy activities that we get involved in. Networking is our primary chosen marketing activity, because at the end of the day, no man is an island, no man stands alone. You know, we really need to have the reach of being able to get ourselves out to other people who are also having conversations. One way I typically explain this is that we like to talk to other people who are going after the exact same ideal client or customer as we are, but they're going after them for a different reason and to potentially provide a different solution. For example, some of the more common areas where I get referrals from are bankruptcy attorneys, divorce attorneys. I get a lot of referrals from attorneys, and I get a lot of referrals from brokers and agents. And typically, they have one solution or perhaps a couple of solutions available to this very same person, this very same customer that I'm looking to serve. I simply play a different role. So the bankruptcy attorney can try to help them to keep their house by restructuring their debt. When the bankruptcy attorney and the customer determine that that's not going to work and that keeping the home is no longer a realistic possibility, they tend to bring me into the process and let me help them with exiting the home in the smoothest possible way.
Yeah, that makes sense. A couple messages came in privately. One of them, and I'm going to kind of paraphrase this, but the gist of it was housing prices seem pretty steady. I know that there's a lot of markets in the United States where, first glance, like there's probably nothing wrong. So housing prices seem steady. Why are people defaulting on their mortgages? What's the most common thing you're seeing in the market around this? Because I think you guys have picked up on something that a lot of people haven't, and you guys have the data behind what's actually happening. And you guys can kind of look back on like 2007, 2008 and say, hey, this looks very similar. So can we go into that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is debt, man. Debt's out of control. In this country, debt is out of control. Consumer debt has never been as high as it is right now as we're doing this live video. At no point in U.S. history has consumer debt ever been as high as it is right now at this exact moment. This is credit card debt. This is auto debt. Yes, most people have left the equity in their homes and have not refinanced it out recently due to the rates. That is accurate. It's a very accurate statement. However, people live month to month. The average American, give or take, of course, it's going to vary from zip code to zip code and state to state, but the average American, give or take a couple grand, makes about $65,000 a year. That means they have roughly $5,000 a month pre-tax to work with, maybe a little bit more than that, $5,500, something like that. That's what they've got to work with. So if they get hit with a $200 insurance increase, a $200 a month gas increase, and a $200 a month fuel increase in what their personal expenses.
Might
have lost him. We might have lost him. I mean, it's basically where he's going, right? Is over 60% of households in the U.S. live month to month, and what's happened over the last couple of years? Yeah, they might have purchased a house, at 3% debt, in 2020 or 2021, and they might have overpaid $50,000 or $100,000 for that property, waived all of their contingencies, and then they didn't think about a year later. The taxes, the insurance, those things go up based on the price that you purchased the property at. And we've been in a crazy time for inflation, right? So now we're talking about homeowners, even if they bought the property here in the last couple of years, having an extra additional $600, $700, $800 a month in expense. And that is a lot to bear. We had a bunch of people that were already in the pre-foreclosure process before 2020, or do I say the C word, right? A bunch of people were in that process before March of 2020, when all of a sudden the entire country was told to stop paying their mortgage, stop paying their rent, stop doing all this stuff. In the meantime, the government was injecting trillions of dollars into the economy. You don't think that something's coming? It's coming, and it's on our doorstep right now with the credit card debt, the auto debt. But we are also now at 3 million plus households around the country that are now more than 30 days behind on their mortgage, right? So you have people who have equity in their properties potentially, but that equity is trapped because the first minute you miss that first payment, you become unbankable. Your first call normally is to your mortgage broker to say, hey, I need to refinance this. I need to take some equity out. Can I get a home equity line of credit? And they look at you and say, nope, you don't meet our standards because you have defaulted, right? So now everybody that's running around saying that there's so much equity in the houses, the housing market and stuff like that, if you stop paying in 2020, right, and you're now in 2023, that equity is gone rather quickly based on the simple fact that you haven't made payments, but also with all of the penalties and all of the other things that come along with it. So there's a lot of reasons why we're about to come into a big 4 to 6 year cycle of pre-foreclosures and needing to be able to provide solutions. This is going to be what I call an asset collection period. And we talked a lot about those lead sources, whether it's the notice of default or the realtors. We're seeing real estate investors leave the real estate profession in droves right now because the inventory is low. There is no inventory. Nobody wants to move. Nobody wants to sell. Guess what's still there? As evidence of Williams' 23 years in doing this, pre-foreclosures are always there in any market. So we're doing deals, we're doing business because we're solving that, and it's just starting to ramp up. Christina asked about real estate agents. A couple of my, I've taken in 6 deals in the last 2 weeks, and they come from 2 really big real estate investment groups. One's a local turnkey provider, right, who has done over 300 houses a year for like the last 3 or 4 years. They don't know how to solve the pre-foreclosure process. They knew what I did, so they send it to me, right? That rescission of contract that I was just talking about, that was done with the local investor bringing it to the solution expert, right? And then another one is a rather large wholesale operation out of the St. Louis area that did the same thing. They know what we do and they know what we specialize in, so they're bringing those deals to us. So we are doing business when other people aren't doing business because of what we're focused on. And the next 4 to 6 years, people who can provide these type of solutions aren't going to have to leave the real estate profession to do so, right? They're going to be here helping.
It comes down to several things, but I mean, like, so grit is one of them. And if you guys don't know what grit means, it's basically your ability to get kicked in the balls a bunch of times and just continue standing there. So agents, brokers, wholesalers, etc. Dude, we've seen massive amounts, even on our end, massive amounts of people that are just like, I'm gonna try something else because I think it's easier. Typically, that there's a lot of money to be made when people start to say that. But just to kind of mirror, Rick, what you're saying, man. So you look at the C word. I don't know which way my camera's going. You look at the C word, and you look at all of these landlords that had mortgages or debt. Certainly, they have things like utility bills and insurance, etc. Certainly, there's bills that have to be paid. And then one way or another, all of these tenants, which there's a shit ton of tenants and people that rent in the United States. But you look at just like this tidal wave of, it's not just mom and pops, right? It's these large people, these large investors, even like large flippers that were holding properties that have now all of this expense. You have stuff like the adjustable rate mortgages that are going up. But you look at this tidal wave and it's like, what a great opportunity to pick up a skill set, which this is. Guys, make no mistake, this is a skill set that you can make a lot of money in if you understand how to play the game. So I think it's a tidal wave. I do. I think there's going to be a lot of people that make a lot of money. There was in 2007, 2008.
Absolutely. Sorry, I ended up cutting out a little bit there because my phone overheated. I'm in the sunshine state, of course, and the sunshine was beating down on my phone through the windshield and overheated it and shut it right off. I haven't had that happen in a long time, but I just got a reminder that's a thing.
I just picked up where you dropped off.
I assumed that.
Yeah. Adam was saying, he's been in the auto industry for 20 plus years. He's never seen so many 4-digit car payments in his life. Fred had a good question as well. Kind of going back to the professionals that you guys do work with. You guys mentioned some different turnkey providers. I know you guys work with different attorneys, etc. How are the professionals that refer deals to you compensated?
In most cases, they're compensated by the fact that it's a back and forth referral system. So most of the bankruptcy attorneys that refer me business when their client can no longer afford to keep the property I'm actively referring them business whenever I'm going out and prospecting and talking to homeowners that could potentially be an ideal client for either of us. I'm sending them that business as well. You know what I mean? So it's generally it's a back and forth thing rather than necessarily a profit sharing thing. And largely that's because attorneys for the most part are pretty highly regulated, especially if they work for a firm that they don't personally own. And of course, it does vary from state to state as well. Very similar with real estate agents and brokers. If they get too loose with trying to compensate or being compensated, they can enter into a position where they're potentially involved in a conflict of interest, and that can be a problem. However, agents, for example, I use agents to sell everything that I sell. I very, very, very rarely sell a property without having an agent do it for me. I use agents to manage my properties. I use property management companies that are also licensed professionals. I use attorneys every single day, every day. I have legal bills due every single day. It's just a part of my life.
So yeah, and adding on to that just a little bit, as Fred asks, right? I have a local real estate agent that I work with, right? She understands exactly how I do things. If a lead is generated by myself or brought to me, guess who is my realtor? Let's say on a short sale, she is my realtor. So I'm actually bringing her those deals. When an agent says, "Hey, I've got a house with low equity, no equity, not enough time to sell on the retail market. This is a potential short sale." That agent is also paid by the bank, right? In a short sale, the bank is willing to pay that 6% commission. So when you start talking to realtors, we know realtors in our circle that make six figures a year by simply doing nothing but short sale listings, right? So a lot of easy ways to actually compensate these professionals that you work with. But in my case of the other investors, think about it. If it's not an investor's skill set to actually handle these pre-foreclosures, they send it over to me. I can either, if they're going to keep the property, I can negotiate that contract for them for a fee, or if they're going to turn around and move the property to a buyer, somebody on their buyer's list, then it just becomes a 50-50 deal with my entity. So a fee to negotiate it for them, or a 50-50 split if their exit strategy is to sell it to somebody else. In their eyes, 50% of something is better than 100% of nothing. We're taking their trash leads and turning them into something.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I mean, why wouldn't you do that? Will, somebody said the IRS turned your phone off. Is that you?
I love
Mr.
that
Modi.
guy. He's hilarious.
Mr. Modi. Yeah, I
I
mean,
love
yeah.
that
So
guy.
why would an agent? I mean, I like the example of an agent. Why would an agent refer you deals? Well, because you could probably send them hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of listings that didn't fit your criteria, right? Like I know you guys were just touching on that, but when we used to do a lot of wholesaling and we were working with agents, like I would demand a massive amount from them. I want expired listings. I want pocket listings. I want you to go show houses for me, go take my dog on a walk, like whatever it was. But every time I would do a marketing campaign, I would get roughly 8, 10, 12 retail leads. And every single one of those leads was referred over to my agent. Every single one of them. So I love that strategy of like, you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back, because it's freaking profitable, man. It's not about, I shouldn't say
It
this,
also
but
makes lighter work.
yeah,
Makes
I
more
mean,
money and lighter work,
I was just going to say, like, it's not about being nice, but because it's not. I mean, like, this is a business relationship. This is a transactional relationship. Like, yes, we can, like each other as whatever, but like, I'm in this to make money and so are you. So this is what I want to do for you, and this is what I'm going to expect back. Like, there's nothing wrong with that at all.
Exactly.
At all. So a couple more private messages. How do you guys presently help people with this? If they can't, or how do you presently help people with this if they can't afford to leave their house because of the price of real estate? So they can't afford to leave the house. Where do people go to live if they're so screwed up with high debt?
There are a ton of different options for that. And if we're being truly candid, it's one of the worst parts of the job. Most of those options are not overly pleasant most of the time. These people are at rock bottom. They have a long road ahead of them in most cases. And that long road, the best we can do really is kind of lead them to water, metaphorically speaking. We very often end up relocating people into assisted living facilities, largely because the most common group of people that I'm helping out of pre-foreclosure are elderly people, first and foremost. The second largest group that I'm dealing with are single mothers or single parents. There's been some single fathers as well, but single parents where they've got, two parents that live in two separate households. So they've got two separate rent or mortgage payments, plus two separate electric payments, plus two separate, Wi-Fi payments, or whatever the hell you want to call it, all that other stuff, right? It just gets too expensive. So broken homes and the elderly are the two most common groups that I end up dealing with. The third group is going to be people with medical problems, usually very serious medical problems. We're talking about, chronic illness, the type of stuff that usually ends. So in many, many, many cases, we're relocating people, either helping them relocate to a friend or family member's home where they can, live the way that they end up living until they can get back on their feet, if that's something that's going to be happening. We also have relationships with both government and private alternative living situations, such as assisted living facilities, shelters of various different types. I hate to say this because it's very unpleasant, but we have had to deal with some situations where there was domestic abuse involved, and we've had to help people relocate to shelters. That's not the most fun. None of the, dealing with people that are in pain is not fun. Everybody we're dealing with is going through hell, much as possible, and just make it bearable. You know what I mean? That's really all we're able to do in most cases. But we're able to get them out of the situation safely so that there is a possibility of having a good future.
Yeah, you can't have it all. So like the people that I've talked to, it's like they want to stay in the house forever. Oftentimes that's not a possibility.
Right.
Oftentimes they want to get out of a super crappy house and go live in a mansion. Probably not going to happen, right? So like our job is to give them, hey, these are your realistic options that are available to you right now. What you do with that information, I mean, it is what it is, but this is the situation, right? So, guys, we do have a hard stop coming up here in just a couple minutes. I know that there's a lot of people that are very interested in learning this. So I want everybody watching this, if this piqued your interest and you are saying, this is something that I could see myself doing, this is a problem that I could see myself solving, because I enjoy helping people and I like making a lot of money. Like if that is you, highly recommend you guys join the community. It is called the Kingdom Center. We will put a link down in the chat for you. But I highly recommend you guys join this. Both of these gentlemen are in the network or in the app, and we do have opportunities where you guys could work with them more directly through that. So again, two of the best guys in this industry, specifically like the pre-foreclosure stuff. They do creative financing like nobody's business. So highly, highly, highly recommend it. We got time for one more question. I'm going to pop it up really quickly on the screen, and then I'm trying to think of who talks faster. Rick, this one's all you, bro. William talks too much. What would you say is it's true, man. What would you say is a good estimate of an incubation period for somebody who was just starting pre-foreclosures, the time from start to first deal closed? What do you think?
Time to start to first deal closed. It depends on if you're going it alone or if you're going it with somebody that knows what they're doing, right? And that can be by way of being part of a community. That can be by way of submitting a JV, right? Hey, I've got a lead that I don't know how to help. This is somebody in financial distress. So I would want to make sure I'm not the reason for them going into foreclosure, right? So I'm going to go work with somebody that knows what they're doing. So if you are coming into a community and you're actually taking the action and doing the work, it's not unrealistic, even in the case of a short sale, to have your first deal closed in 3 to 6 months. The average short sale will take 3 to 6 months to close, not 2 years like the one I just got done with, right? If you're doing it on your own, you're going to fumble quite a bit, right? And you're going to get to a stuck point where you don't know what to do, and you're just going to walk away. You're like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just going to walk away. I'm going to leave this person where they're at. So it can take a lot longer. Can you learn this on your own? Yes. But why would you want to go learn this on your own when you can actually get things done right from the beginning? As William and I talked about it, right? Those that we work with have more than a 90% success rate on the actual deal. We will help them cut teeth and understand. You do want to work this, right? Hence the name IPA, income producing activities. Focus on what's going to be an income producing activity for you, and then cut or refer out or do something to the others that aren't going to be willing to work with you, aren't going to be the right fit for you. So I would say realistically, if you're taking the right action and the right action steps, 3 to 6 months.
I would add one thing, guys, as we kind of close this out. You can do other deals while you're waiting for a pre-foreclosure. Like if a couple months, like even 3 to 6 months is a turnoff, that's one type of deal. Like you can do other deals like in the meantime. We've had people that have closed a wholesale deal in 21 days. It's like things can happen quickly, but if you're looking for income quicker, there are quicker options, but understand like there's a lot of good money to be made in pre-foreclosure. And it's something where once you start to build a pipeline, not every single deal is going to be out that far, because you're going to start to get, one of them starts to close a month or a couple of months because you built your pipeline months ago, right? So gentlemen, greatly appreciate you for jumping in. That's all the time we've got today. Guys, comment down below and just give these guys a shout out and let them know that you appreciate their time. They're both very, very busy. So guys, we'll end with that. And again, appreciate you guys.
Always great
Thanks,
seeing you
everybody.
guys. Peace. Catch you soon.